So musicians are fantastic at problem solving, and you're probably already doing problem solving at the moment. You're probably changing your band or your choral program to general music. You've gone from in-person to online. You've gone from being able to teach every instrument and singing in your classroom to now having so many restrictions. Yeah, I know from what I've been seeing on the forums that you're all engaged in trying to find a solution. And this is problem solving. And this is why the arts are so important in education, because we teach these skills. Hi, I'm Rachel Hardman, and this is Passionate About Music Education. And today we're going to talk about problem solving and why it's so important for us to develop this skill in our students, and why music and the performing arts subjects are so important for teaching students problem solving and have these wonderful life skills. So one of my favourite ways of helping students develop problem solving skills is to give them a task that is generally performance or composing based. The student's task is to go from nothing to a finished article, a finished performance, a finished composition, and they have to work through all the problems. What instruments are they going to use? What sounds are they going to use? How are they going to put together their work? What happens when one of their classmates is ill on the day of performance? They have to problem solve. And as I always say to the students, don't worry, I understand that you've got to change it or adapt it based on the fact that you're missing a person. But find ways of fixing it and performing what you can do. So they're instantly having to problem solve their way out of their problem and come up with a solution. And it's amazing how quickly students step up to that challenge. And the more we encourage students to think for themselves rather than us telling them what to do and fixing it for them, the better life skills that they will have for going into the future. We really want to break away from this demand relationship where they demand from us the answer, and of course we be pleasers and give them the answer, or will we demand straight back that we're not going to give them the answer. What we actually want to do is a lot of development growth, relationship growth, and that is for them to look into how to develop problem solving skills and working together to come up with solutions. So I've seen this in many instances in terms of music and drama, where students are up against this problem of students being absent on the day of assessment and them having to rewrite, adapt and quickly redo their performance. And of course I take that into consideration when I'm giving feedback and assessment, and I will praise wherever possible the work that they did and the fact that they've also overcome this problem and how they've been successful. And I think that's really an important skill. You know, we're doing that at the moment as teachers. We've got this problem of restriction on instruments and singing and what we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. Yeah, we've got to come up with solutions, and we could moan and moan and moan about it for hours and hours, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. We have to kind of keep a positive mindset as much as we can and try and find solutions. And that's what we need to teach to students, that positive mindset. How can you come up with a solution, even if it's not as perfect as you would want it to be? I really love coaching students in instrumental lessons to start thinking for themselves, to do the problem solving and to be self-reflective. If I teach those skills in my lesson with them from the very first lesson, then I know that when they go home they'll have more success in their practice, because otherwise we know that children don't like to practice because often they don't know how to practice or what it is that they need to do. And more importantly, how do they get better? They go, oh, this is a piece of music Mrs. set me and I've played it very brilliant, I can play it excellent. But they're not really listening, they're not really self-evaluating. So with my students I would always talk about, so for instance, we learn in a piece of music, does my student play it from beginning to end? And then at the end I'd coach them into, well, what would you do next? How would you improve this? What worked really well? What were you pleased with? What wasn't quite so good? And I usually tell you, oh, maybe the rhythm wasn't right, or they weren't tonguing, they didn't count the rest properly, whatever it is that they identify, which is fantastic because it means they're starting to learn and understand. So then you go, right, this time I want you to play it through and focus on what you've just told me. So if you've told me the rhythm's wrong, now I want you to really focus on getting the rhythm correct. So play it again, we have another chat about it, and then this time it might be, how could you improve the breathing, or how could you improve the tonguing of this phrase? How can you make it sound more musical? And then at the end of the session I'll talk to students about, well, what steps did we go through to improve the piece? What did you come up with? What did you identify? And the more you train them from the very beginning of teaching, an instrument, the more they will do this and be able to solve the problems that they're having with music for themselves, which means, of course, they'll progress much quicker, which is what we want them to do, because then, of course, our bands and choirs and whatever else we're doing in school and our exam grades and our exam students, everybody will be achieving a much quicker pace and be more likely to stick with music on the long term. One of the other skills that I like to do is get children to problem solve with each other in terms of like instrumental lessons. And in the UK and where I've taught abroad, we often have instrumental teachers come into the school during the day, and it's fantastic. So you'll have your flute teacher in for the whole day, and students come out on a rota, so they don't miss the same class lesson every week. However, there is always one or two subject areas that complain and make the children's life uncomfortable. And although you say at the beginning of the year, every year, look, if you have an issue with a student coming out for lessons, please let me know. I will fix the timetable. Don't tell the child off because it makes them feel uncomfortable. They don't know how to get out of that problem. Of course, there's always a teacher who doesn't do that and just belittles the student in the class. And of course, then they get worried about coming out from instrumental lessons and want to quit instruments. So what I really do is try and teach my students to problem solve that. So if they know, for instance, that their class teacher or a specific class teacher is particularly difficult and going to be a bit unkind to them, then what I do is I say, I don't mind when you come out for your lesson during that day as long as you've swapped with somebody else. If there is nobody who's prepared to swap with you or can't swap with you, come and see me, but we will figure it out and we will problem solve this together. And I always train students from year 7 to do this, obviously when they come up to secondary school. And the sooner they understand that, the sooner they can problem solve for themselves. And I had, like in my last school, had groups of girls all rotating, and they would be teaching a lesson and a different student come in than you'd expect. And they went, oh, we've swapped with so-and-so because they've got this test or they've got this assessment, or actually they've got this particular teacher who won't let them out. And you go, okay, brilliant. And for me, it didn't matter as long as they turn up for their lesson. And the fact that they were then being sensible enough to communicate with each other, be proactively aware of what was coming, and also problem solve for themselves is fantastic. And that is what music is so great at, teaching our students. And the more we can encourage that, particularly in those younger years, the more successful they'll be in the future. And we really want our students to think for themselves and not us telling them what to do and then responding, that whole demand relationship. So now we come to the action points. How can we put this into practice? 1, coach your students to be self-reflective, for them to really think about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they can fix their own problems. Of course we'll support them, of course we'll give them guidance, of course we want them to do really well. We won't just leave them to get on with it and fail. That's not our responsibility to let them fail. It's our job to help them. But the more we coach them to unpick the problems for themselves and come up with their own solutions, the quicker they progress and the more success they feel, the student feels, in their own music making. Action point 2, encourage a positive mindset. We know how difficult learning a musical instrument can be and frustrating. And we've been there, we've done it, we've done the practice, we've experienced the pain. And of course our students are going to experience the same pain. And we've got to tell them it's normal. We've been there, we understand their pain, we can relate to it. And what we need to do is to keep encouraging that positive mindset. We know practicing when you're tired and hungry and thirsty doesn't work. Practicing at 10 o'clock at night doesn't work. Practicing after you've been doing 2 hours of sport doesn't necessarily work. So it's encouraging students to find positive ways of practicing, positive ways of being successful at music, and keeping that positive mindset of they can achieve. Often they'll tell you what they can't do. Our job is to pick out from them what they can do and keep talking to the students about what you can do and what you are already doing well, so they see that progress. It's really important students understand that they are progressing, and they don't realise how much they've progressed in a month or 2 months or 6 months. And it's our job to keep encouraging that positive mindset of continuous growth. Action point 3 is give them the scaffolding and as much as you can, and not necessarily just tell them the answers. It's really easy to just give them the answer and to just say, you need to play this, this, and this like this. You need to answer this question exactly like this, which is fine. And we can do that if we're rushed against time. But the more we encourage students to think for themselves and be problem solvers and use their initiative and give them the scaffolding, the tools to be successful, whether it's composing or listening or performing, exam work, recitals, band, whatever it is that we're asking them to do. Put the scaffolding in, but without just telling them the answer. We can really help students learn this skill in our subject more than any other subjects. Action point 4, a good way to help with scaffolding is to keep your questions open so that they're not closed questions of yes, no. The more we get that open communication, and it's hard sometimes with year 7 to get them to talk, but the more you do that in your one-to-one sessions or in class or in ensembles, the more confident they will feel and the more confident they are to share their ideas of how to problem solve. And my final action point is encourage students to problem solve with other students. Really encourage your band students to help each other if they're doing instrumental lessons and they're on rotas or they're working together on composition. Really encourage that growth that they need to learn how to problem solve, even if it's not necessary with their best friends. We really want our music students to talk to each other, not just in year 7s, but year 7s talking with year 11s or year 13s, and encourage that music community. And when we get it right, it's amazing because there's so much vibrance going on in the department. It's so lovely to see year 7s and year 13s talking to each other and having that music connection. And I think that's a wonderful gift that we can give our students. And the more we get them to work together and help each other and problem solve with each other, the better it is for our music programs and for the future of music and for the students themselves, even if after they leave school they never continue to do music. We want them to do that, and the more we make our programs successful, the more likely we are to students doing music beyond school, either in university or at amateur level or even for a profession. So I hope these tips have been really helpful, and this episode on problem solving has given you a few ideas to go back into the classroom with. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comment. I'd love your feedback, and look forward to seeing you again when we talk about why music is so essential to the curriculum, why music is so vital for our students. I'm Rachel Hardman, and this is Passionate About Music Education.